We've got some really good leaders in the state of Illinois, whether they be our congressional leaders. And I know right now we've got some issues with one of our senators, and rightfully so, based on this most recent vote and occurrences. But on a state level, and I've talked about this for months, if not, over a year now, not only do we want to have a stronger presence on a federal level, but we want to make sure that our state legislatures across the country are filled with people who know what they're doing and are forceful and fight for bills that are important in the state that they're elected in. But also what I've come to realize that pretty much any bill in one state is going to be important to contiguous states and throughout the rest of the country. With us this morning is one of our own state representatives who has been leaning in hard on making sure that environment is protected, and that would be our own state representative, Tracy Katz Muhl from the district up there in the Northbrook area, part of Chicago suburbs. Good morning, Representative, and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Do I have your district? It's 57th district, right?
It is the 57 district, centered in Northbrook, but also Wheeling and Glencoe and other suburbs.
Yeah, I mean, I have to tease you a little bit because when I looked at the map of your district, I'm like, how do you make your way around? Because it's definitely kind of a hodgepodge of, sort of put together, but I mean that in the most positive of ways, because you kind of got to get around, and your district is not just lined up as a rectangular or a box district. It's connected to a few different communities, right?
Oh, this one runs east-west all the way from the lakefront in Glencoe all the way across to Cook County, Buffalo Grove. So definitely back and forth. Need a car for this one. So
Good for you. Well, welcome to the show, and thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning. I definitely want to talk about one of your recent bills, but I also, because you've got a few, by the way, but I also want to have an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to our audience and let folks know a little bit about you. Take a moment, let us know, kind of your ascent, because you're what I'll call a recent, I won't call you a rookie, but you're a recent state representative. But let our audience know a little bit about your background and how you got to the point where you're now one of our top representatives in the state of Illinois.
Oh, thanks so much. That's a really kind thing to say. One of the nicest compliments somebody gave me when I arrived in Springfield, about 2 years ago, was that I did this sort of the old-fashioned way. This was the fifth time I had served in public office. I did 2 terms on our local school board. The last 6 of those years as president, including going through the pandemic. So cheers to anybody who was on a school board during the pandemic. And also have served 2 terms as a Cook County committee person for the Democratic Party up here in Northfield Township. So when I got down to Springfield, it was a new environment, but certainly was very used to working with a board and with people from all over the county and state to make good policy together.
You had I guess we'll call it the ascent that also included attending Georgetown, and then you got your law degree from the University of Chicago, and you practiced before you basically decided to get involved in politics as a committee person in Northfield Township. So that gave you a good foundation, I would say, to understanding legislation and how to use the phrase, how the sausage is made. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I am on sabbatical from practicing law for the most part now, but in some ways I've never felt more like I was in law school, because this is really the place where we take a look at law from a big picture lens. How are we making good choices that think about law and economics, law and human behavior, and are we setting up laws in the right way to encourage people to make smart choices for all of us as a society? And that's just really a privilege to be in that role.
Yeah, and you've done, I mean, this most recent, and we'll talk about this from the lens or through the lens of what I like to say is environmental, and this is your freshwater conservation bill. Tell us a little bit about that and why that bill is important, and then what are some of the what I like to put the dotted lines to other parts of the environment that this bill represents.
Absolutely. This was an initiative that was brought to me by the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, a body I was obviously very familiar with already from my work as a committee person, had helped over many years of cycles to elect all of the members of that board and see the different ways that they helped develop policy there. They have 7 large facilities across Cook County, which focus on things like treating and reclaiming wastewater. That's really important. We live in an area here where we have access to one of the greatest freshwater resources in the country, but we know that we need to do everything we can to maintain it and to use treated water instead of fresh water wherever we can. So the proposal focused on updating the Illinois Environmental Protection Act, which had already been amended to make clear that treated water could be used for things like irrigation purposes, but it wasn't explicit about other uses. And as we see more and more industrial uses come online that need to use water for non-potable, non-drinking purposes, think coolants, right? When we have these big data centers that need liquids to come in and cool, if we can use treated water as opposed to fresh water, we're making smart choices for everybody all around. So the heart of this initiative was getting explicit permission in the Illinois Environmental Protection Act for using treated wastewater for these kinds of non-potable, non-drinking industrial uses that benefit everybody all the way through the cycle, right? From the government to labor to industry to the environmentalists. And it was great to see that coalition of people come together to unanimously back this bill.
Well, it's incredibly important because, with the current law allowing, as I understand it, and again, a lot of times I have to read these things quickly and think, how does this tie into the legislation? But we can use the water for things like irrigation and things like that. But we haven't really, and now that the bill is in place, we hadn't really put this in place for the industrial uses, and to some extent was kind of wasting by not having that in place. Am I correct in how I'm saying that?
Yeah, and everybody's gut instinct here was this is covered by the intent of the law, but it wasn't explicitly in there. And obviously everybody wants to be careful, have the law be precise. So that's why we went in cooperation with all of those different agencies and partners to ask that we explicitly spell out that industrial reuse is also permitted and, in fact, an environmental and corporate good goal.
Yeah, what's interesting, too, is that this is a way for us to reduce taxpayer costs. I mean, we always look for ways to, I think sometimes when voters, consumers, citizens think about reducing cost, they think about it from let's cut something. And I'm an advocate of not that we don't cut certain things where there is, for lack of better words, not the most efficient use of certain things or our resources, but sometimes it's allocating, reapplying things. Let's do this over here, because then that opens up so much more opportunity to maximize that resource. I think that's what has to be part of the conversation around reducing costs, is to maximize the resources that are already in place. This bill does that, right?
Yes, exactly. It's that green recycling triangle that we think about: reduce, reuse, recycle. This is a perfect application of it in an industrial context, in the context of saving one of the resources, our fresh water, that we are all most caring about right now. Yeah.
Representative, tell us, in your observation and your experience, and I hope I'm not going too far afield here, why us folk out here have a blind spot when it comes to conservation and recycling and energy conservation and being more green or being less waste. Why is there a blind spot there in your experience?
Sometimes there can be, just because we have such tremendous proximity to the Great Lakes. We haven't lived in one of those states where there are notices that come out frequently from our local government or our state government or county government advising us this is a week to be extra careful about water, or rules about flushing toilets, right? These are things we know about, but we don't live with them day to day. It doesn't mean it isn't somewhere we could end up if we're not careful. So doing everything we can to take these steps affirmatively now, it's smart policy. It is unanimous bipartisan policy. I was thrilled to see that vote out of committee be entirely unanimous and bipartisan.
Yeah. Did you feel, as you were leading up to this, did you feel that there would be a partisan pull? In other words, folks that may not see this as necessary and may be wasteful in and of itself. Did you feel that there might be some of that going on in the run up to this?
I felt good about this bill going in because of the coalition of people involved. There were affirmative proponent witness lists filed from both industry and labor side of the coin, from government and public, from environmental and good governments like the League of Women Voters. That sense of allies coming in boded well. And of course, we took the time to affirmatively have the conversations with every member of the Energy and Environment Committee to make sure they knew what this was about. In fact, most of the questions I had were about understanding exactly what it meant. If you don't live and work in this environment, you don't necessarily know what it looks like to reuse treated water, right? So giving that cooling station, data center kind of example to people, you could see the light click on as people said, yes, I get it. This is something I want to be part of. And again, really emphasizes why the human element of this work, really talking to everybody, making sure you're engaging about the bill, not just sort of the dry legislative words on the paper happens. That's how you get everybody on the same page, understanding not just the words, but what they mean and what the goal is.
And not to sound, pie in the sky or with rose-tinted glasses, but at the end of the day, if you, me, and three other people are walking down the street, we're walking down Michigan Avenue, we're walking down the street in Northbrook, we don't necessarily know the political stripe of the persons that might be coming in our direction. Your family and my family, we're walking down the street and we don't know. But what we do know, and this comes back to what you said about the human element and the importance of that connection and communication, is that the air that we breathe, the water that we drink, and all the rest of those resources are important to all of us. It seems as though, and help me out with this because I know our listeners want to know your observation on this, that when it comes to environmental issues, they become partisan because some people may not believe that we have a problem and others know that we do have a problem. So how have you been able to navigate that void where some people are just like, we don't have a problem with our environment. We don't have a problem with this. And others are like, well, wait a minute. How come we've got water tables that are messed up? How come we have folks who are in communities that they suffer from the lack of environmental preservation?
Yeah, I think it starts with really good listening. When you're engaging with people about the bills, first of all, you can get a sense of whether they understand at a base level what you're trying to do, right? This is a little bit technical, the area in which MWRD was looking to advance the legislation. And so that first level was really important for this bill, getting everybody on the same page with a handful of factual scenarios that they could relate to. Maybe you were familiar with this in the irrigation, farming kind of use, but the idea of how these would be piped into a data center was new, but accessible, right, once you took the time to talk and speak about it. And then sometimes you go one more level and people start to worry about cost. It's not that they don't understand an environmental crossover, but they're trying to weigh it out and prioritize, right? Is the value we're going to get in terms of environmental savings going to be outweighed by what the costs are? And those conversations, too, they can be tackled with data and information before you leap to that last sort of just doubters, deniers kind of bucket. Mm-hmm. And that's really, for the most part here in Illinois, the very smallest amount. And if you can get those first two groups together, we understand what we're doing and we have a handle on the cost-benefit analysis, are properly weighing environment in it, you can get a really big coalition together on most things most of the time. So doing the work to get everybody in the first two buckets on the same page, that's where you can really get the legislation done.
One of our listeners sent a comment that said some of this lack of understanding or knowledge or partisanship is driven by corporate interest who don't want to see their ability to do what they do be stunted by legislation that would force them to be more responsible.
It absolutely can be. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It absolutely can be. Part of what made this legislation unique was the fact that industry was at the table. The Illinois Manufacturing Association was a proponent. The Illinois Commerce Commission was a proponent. Everybody could see where this was going to be net positive to access their non-potable cooling liquids through MWRD and similar facilities, and good for the environment at the same time.
Do we have any big data centers coming into the state of Illinois that indirectly or maybe directly would be benefactors of this repurposing of water from a cooling standpoint?
I can't give you the name of a specific facility right now. That was just a really good prototypical new use that people are familiar with that we could share. We expect there'll be ones that have some decent proximity to the facilities. Like I mentioned, our Cook County facilities for Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. There's 7 sites that are spread all over the county, from Des Plaines to Skokie to Cicero to Hodgkins. So this is going to affect facilities all over Cook County, which is wonderful to see.
That because if it's going to affect Cook County, the second largest county in America, by the way, which I know you already know, but if it's going to affect Cook County, it's going to affect our collar counties and our neighboring states. I mean, that's why your bill is so doggone important, and it's not just even though it's locally passed legislation, a locally effort. It's a national issue. And this is one of the things that I've really, really been just pushing is the local items, the local issues are regional, they're national issues. What do you see? And I'm not trying to ask you to look into the looking glass, but what do you see as the impact of this type of a bill on other states and the country at large?
I hope other states will look at this, too, if they aren't already experimenting in this area. As we noted right at the top, this legislation already existed here in Illinois for irrigation. Obviously, we've got some of that use here in Illinois, and hat tip to the Cook County Farm Bureau, but even more so all over the state of Illinois. So I'm hoping people are seeing this, that if they haven't gotten into the industrial or irrigation spaces already, they happen and join. It's really a smart path that can bring together all of the different sectors, labor, government, private industry, to make a good step forward for the environment.
Got it. And I know that this is something that you're probably navigating all the time, and that's some of the federal, or let me be more specific, some of the current administration on a federal level's position on EPA and, what we've done with the Paris Agreement and how we've kind of are isolating ourselves, or at least the administration is trying to isolate us from being involved in better conservation and more appropriations toward a better environment. How are you navigating that, or what are your observations there?
That's absolutely a worry. It's one of the reasons I thank the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District for standing up and saying this is a time to make the Illinois Environmental Protection Act stronger and more explicit so people are comfortable taking advantage of all of these uses. We've obviously seen all of the national EPA leadership staff here in Illinois turn over in ways that are really worrisome, changes to facilities and staffing. So doing everything we can at the state level, especially in the blue states, but I sure hope in the red ones too, to recognize that this kind of smart reuse of water is good for everyone.
Yeah, we're with you on that. Just this year alone, you guys, for those of you who are listening, this is how busy Representative Katz Muhl has been. I'm not going to list them all because it's too many to list. Just this year alone, over half the bills that she's leaned into are ones that are around protecting our environment. She's definitely had her thumb on the scale when it comes to education, but she definitely is an advocate for making sure that our environment is taken care of. And it's great to see the leadership that you've shown. And frankly, we know that all of our representatives in the state of Illinois don't always get along on every single thing, and that's fine. But boy, oh boy, you guys are really taking the lead from the governor on down to show that Illinois is the place to be. The Illinois elected officials are doing their job in the state to really, make this place a great home for so many people. And I personally want to say thank you and appreciate the work that you are doing, and certainly the colleagues that you have in the General Assembly to get certain things done. So we appreciate that.
Thank you so much. And for the whole House and Senate Green Caucuses, everybody appreciates everything you're doing to talk about these issues, to help us build allies. Thanks to the Illinois Environmental Coalition, who is a terrific advocacy partner that brings together all of the different sectors of environmentalism in Illinois to make sure we do this work as smartly and seamlessly as possible. What
are you going to be, we're coming to the end of the first quarter, calendar quarter. What's going to be on your agenda, some top items in the second quarter of this year?
Oh, this is deadline week right now.
Yep.
This is when we want to get things out of the House committees. So my focus is on squarely getting everything we can move through. This one did pass early because it was a nice, tight bill with a big group of proponents. This week we'll be working hard on issues to expand education and working on the community college baccalaureate bill in cooperation with the governor's team. That one's really important to me, and working with Equality Illinois on some quality legislation. And of course, like you shouted out, education. Coming from school board world, I understand all the ways that we can make that work better and tighter for schools all over the state. So all three of those policy areas are going to be front of mind for me as we're working to get things through committee in the the next 5 days.
Well, hopefully that happens. I know you're leaning in hard on that. We would be honored to have you back again in the weeks to come, maybe when we get into the second quarter and you kind of working through the machinations of all the legislation that you're proposing. We can have you back. We can talk about, you can give us some updates in terms of things that you're working on. Would that be okay?
Absolutely. Would love to share more updates. Hopefully good news on many of those fronts.
Wonderful. Thank you for being with us, Representative. We really appreciate it. How can folks find you? Say, how can we volunteer? What are you doing? What can I do to help in the work that you're doing? I know our listeners want to know what they can do to be involved.
Hop online, staterepkatzmuhl.com is the website. There's also, of course, email and social media where you can follow along. We really love the engagement. We love to hear what things our voters are interested in talking about, and great ideas come from voters. A lot of my legislation, both this year and last year, came from people in the district who reach out to problem solve, especially young people. I love running bills that come from students. So please, anytime something comes up, give a ring, and we'll see if there's something already going on or if it's something we can add to that drawing board of ideas for the future.
State Representative Tracy Katz Muhl, 57th District of Illinois, doing the work and getting things done. We appreciate you being with us this morning, and we look forward to having you back in the future.
Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.